Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's your boy Ray, and with me, I got a full house. Welcome, Mac
Good evening.
and Gio.
What is good, folks?
The 2022-2023 club season has finished, and we are still here. And today we'll be discussing some transfer news around the world of footy before we look back at our preseason predictions for the 2022-2023 season. Before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on our social medias, both on Twitter and Instagram. Our handle is at house_of_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. And lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys, and we want you guys getting involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. Just before we do start this podcast, though, we are at the end of the season, so we're going to be going back to sort of a once a week scheduled programming from us before the 2023-2024 season starts. So be on the lookout for just some more evergreen, some more bantering between us before the next season starts. And with that being said, we're going to start right now is quick transfer rumor discussion. Of course, the biggest news around the world of footy right now, Gio, you might be keeping a close eye on this. Manchester United potential takeover. It looks like it's getting closer with, I believe, the Qatari bid from Sheikh Jassim. I believe they were registered as a corporation in the UK now, and so they're moving forward with, I guess, proceedings to take over. So, just off the top, Gio, give us your takes on that.
I hope it does become true. Tired of the Glazers. Honestly, if it does happen, I'll be very happy with you. I'm not gonna lie. I think all Manchester fans have been waiting for this moment. I mean, to be fair, it's not that the Glazers weren't giving us money to spend. It's what they thought about progressing the club in terms of you know putting money back into the facility. Old Trafford. You see these teams getting bigger stadiums and sort of fixing their old stadiums and making modernizing a lot of things. I think it's time for a big club like Man United to do so as well. You kind of have to get with the times, and if they don't want to reinvest in the club, how else are they going to get money back in? So I think Sheikh Jassim does have that sort of idea in the players he wants to bring, and then obviously how he wants to reinvest back into the club to make it competitive in terms of facilities and venue wise to again compete with the bigger clubs, because it just seems like they're lagging behind in that sense. And there's been rumors around that Old Trafford just isn't comparable to other stadiums anymore. So yeah, that like in that sense is great, and I think it's necessary. I think the times with the Glazers have been a little bit overstayed. So I think it's time for a change, and hopefully that will bring in lots of funding, to say the least. To say the least.
I think that's what we can sort of expect if that does happen. Mac, do you sort of echo the same thoughts? Are you wary about sort of this takeover happening?
It'll be interesting to see the timing because I think that Ray, I mentioned to you individually in terms of the timing of how long the takeover happened for Newcastle, where the initial talks happened back in 2017, and the transition to be able to take over didn't happen until the end of 2021, if I remember correctly. So there was an extended time period where even though there were rumors, there was links, there was bids, it took a lot to cross the finish line. This seems to be moving much quicker than that, but the interesting part is because this directly is going to now impact, because they weren't able to do it in season, which I think that would have been the preference in terms of if you were to take a step back and look at the club holistically, to give the new ownership time to implement a transfer plan. If it's a quick transaction, then you're probably going to have a new ownership that is not familiar with the team, understand its needs, might have their own ideas, and they've thus far throughout the transfer window haven't been doing their work accordingly. The kind of a situation kind of highlights it is for me is the De Gea situation, where De Gea, from reports, has an option for the next year, but it's a bloated contract, right? Where they were like, okay, we may want him back, but we don't want to pay him that money, but he's probably not going to accept less money to come back, so we might have to stick in an option. But if we have new ownership, then we might have more money to be able to go buy a new goalkeeper. So it just puts them in kind of a flux of not knowing really what to do at an important time of the season. Off season, right? Where you're looking to be able to make those changes. So I think that if it's going to happen, it needs to happen now, ASAP, as soon as possible. Otherwise, you gotta kind of let I would think this transfer window go and then as new ownership, put yourself in a position to get ready and for the next cycle. Do I think it is going to happen? Yes, because there's a lot of fan backlash in terms of how the club's been run. I think this right now is just a bargaining tool for the Glazers to try to increase the price. Supposedly, Sheikh Yassam, his most recent offer, I think, was for $6 billion, and that's just for the club purchase, not in terms of also a promise to invest an additional $1 billion afterwards, right? If it be off of stadium, players, whatever those needs may be. I don't know how much higher that bid would go, because that would be a record bid across, I think, all major sports teams. So I think it's just a matter of time. But if I'm a Manchester United fan, I need it to happen now and not later.
That's exactly right. Because at this point, if you're Ten Hag, what is your approach? If you want to build a team around you would have got into the offseason kind of with an idea of how you want to rebuild your team, but do you kind of put those plans to the side based on now the takeover that might happen, and then how quickly will those funds be injected into the team ahead of this transfer window where there's still, and we talked about it, man, you're still sort of in a transitional period where there are good discussions happening about sort of players that are leaving and potential players coming in, and how does that really affect the process for Ten Hag, especially because, and we're going to move on to this player now. Kylian Mbappe has come out and said he does not plan on renewing his contract that ends at the end of next year with PSG, and PSG are in the position where they want to either extend his contract now or have him sold this season so that they can at least save some money from his sale. Could that happen for Man U, or could he be looking elsewhere, or who else could really afford him there? I guess Mac, let me toss it to you first for that situation.
I think this is a fascinating situation because, so just to kind of lay the land a little bit, get the lay of the land. Is that the? I don't know. Anyway, the point being is that Mbappe has very few options because he's really priced himself out, and PSG have really priced themselves out from moving to a different type of club, because they've said the one club that they're not going to sell him to is Madrid. We'll sell him to anybody but Madrid, and because that's who Mbappe wants to go play for, as well as Real Madrid have kind of been very open about their interest in Mbappe, but the plan, because they spent all their money on Jude Bellingham, their plan initially was to sign a striker for, let's say, a 2-year term, and then going into the following season when his contract would have expired, look at signing Mbappe kind of outright, where you don't have to pay the transfer fee to save the money and then just increase his wage bill. If that's not the option, who else can really afford 180 million plus whatever wages Mbappe would want, at least in the interim until maybe that 2-year period, or even be okay having him only for a 2-year period before he goes to Madrid? Manchester United in the midst of kind of a transfer, a takeover potentially. If that doesn't happen, I doubt they'll have the money available there to be able to do that, as well as sign other key areas of the pitch that they're working on, like Mason Mount. Newcastle can't yet because of financial fair play rules. Man City, Haaland play with Mbappe. I don't think that makes as much sense because they're more of the archetypal rivals that Messi, Ronaldo, you never saw them play together. I don't think if Mbappe, he wants to be the guy, he's going to go ahead and be play with Haaland. That doesn't make sense to me there. So Bayern are not doing it. For me, I don't see the other option unless the takeover happens. So this might just be poor planning from Mbappe's team of putting that out there that he doesn't intend to sign onto that contract and just should have just kept it to himself and then facilitate the transfer later. Unless, again, the only way is if PSG lets up on their offer, saying, okay, fine, Madrid's the only option, we'll do business. But I don't think they really care that much about money. They more care about their reputation at this point, considering how those links have looked to them.
Yeah, for sure. At this point, yeah, a lot of that is to sort of save face, and they would have definitely taken those news in a negative way from Mbappe. And so, yeah, I mean, if you're Mbappe, it is a tough spot. But Gio, is there anywhere that he could go, or would you take him at Man U? What do you think?
Uh, Again, I think what a lot of Mac touched on is correct. I don't think Man U really have the funds for it just yet, especially as the takeover has not yet been completed, and there's rumors about the takeover not being finalized till the start of the new season. So, with that being said, there's definitely not going to be enough funding for that. Even though we are expecting funding, it's not going to be there in time. I wholeheartedly agree with the Man City situation. I don't see him going there. To be a tandem with Holland, just doesn't make sense for his career and I think his competitive nature, just I don't think would allow it. I think he sees this as an opportunity to create a new sort of rivalry or that comparison sake, like the Messi and Ronaldo, like Max said, a new generation of that. So it kind of really defeats that if he goes there. But yeah, that only leaves one club, and that one club is Real Madrid. For Real Madrid to come out and say that they're not interested in looking for a striker, I think is completely bogus. I think the fact that Karim Benzema did in fact leave kind of opens the door for them to do business together. As it seems like that's the only way, Mbappe does end up there, as there was a lot of, you know, kind of subliminal jawing back and forth after the fact that he kind of, you know, kind of flopped on Madrid. Yeah, so if you really look at it at a football point of view, they don't really have a central striker. Rodrigo, Vinicius, and obviously there's rumors of them signing, the more veteran striker from I think Valencia. There's no front three. It's only a front two, and that's really not how Real Madrid play. So they're really missing that key piece in the middle. Having a player like Mbappe there would be fantastic. Um, and that they're saying that they're not going for Kane or Mbappe, I think it's definitely a stretch. I think they're trying to do everything at a more low key, in a low key way, just like how they signed Jude. Did it in a very low key way. There wasn't a lot of fl- uh, flashy business going on there. So I think they're doing much of the same now. And it really only leaves the door open for PSG to do business with Real Madrid now. So we'll see what he does. Florentino Perez always pulls something out of his ass, and it seems like he might do so here with either Kane or Mbappe. Depends, or he might throw a curveball and sign somebody else. But they're definitely in the market for a striker, especially a starting striker that will guarantee them goals.
So what it sounds like from you guys, you're not closing the door on Mbappe to Madrid, and
Definitely.
I do agree as well. The only thing is I don't see it happening. I don't see it out right out transfer like the one that you saw for example Neymar to Barca. I would see more of like a Mbappe from Monaco to PSG where it's kind of a loan with an obligation to buy in a year or 2 years time, just because of the money that will be involved to make such a big transfer happen. And that's why I know you guys said you guys don't see City happening, but I have to just entertain it because obviously Gundogan could be on his way out. Bernardo Silva could be on his way out.
Bernardo Silva to
They're probably
PSG. That's the
oh
reports. So that could be part of the
Bernardo
deal.
Silva that could definitely soften the blow. Just saw as well Riyad Mahrez is in advanced talks with a team from Saudi Arabia to make that transfer happen. So like, a lot of pieces moving. Maybe Julian Alvarez goes out on loan as well. So hey, I'm not saying it could happen, but I think Man City, in terms of just number of players going out and ability to bring another player in, it could happen. But you never really know what's happening there. Gio?
But just quickly to add to that point, the amount of players they lose for the 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 incoming of one just doesn't seem very Pep like.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just spreading his players very thin. I don't think that's very Pep like. Man City have been known to have a very deep squad, having a strong B side that can compete with the best of them in the Prem as well, even across Europe. So yes, we can entertain it. It's still very possible because you know strong defense is a great offense. So hey, it's always possible. And the transfer market is a surprise sometimes. So, if Pep does pull this off, I mean, who's really gonna stop them?
Exactly, and that's why I kind of wanted to link it to Man City because the next player we're going to talk about is Declan Rice. Reports that Bayern have pulled out for the race to sign him, Mac. But and Arsenal are leading the race, but I did also see that perhaps Man City are interested in signing Declan Rice. I'm not sure if there's a lot of truth to that, considering they do have Kovacic coming in, and they have, of course, Rodri and Stones, who's now playing more so in that position. But what are your thoughts about Declan Rice and where he could end up this season, Mac?
I don't know if this is too forward on me. He's only going to go to Arsenal. The question is how much money. In terms of other options, we're going to touch on a situation in a moment, so I'm going to kind of save my powder dry in one area. But for me, Rice is best fit is with Arsenal. That transfer makes sense. The rumors have been there, the links have been there, the relationship with the player has been there. In addition, it has been their clear intent of what they wanted to do. It seemed like the first bid that they offered was for 60 plus 20, so an $80 million offer. It's kind of a starting point, and the rumors was like, as soon as the paperwork came in, it was immediately rejected. To which Arsenal knew it was going to be rejected, but they wanted to set kind of the land of, okay, you want 120, we really think he's worth 80. Is there a middle path? And I think that's more so where the conversation will lie, as personal links reportedly are kind of already done between Declan Rice and Arsenal. I think the Man City piece is smart from Man City, because what that's going to do, even though I think there's a 0% chance he's going to go to City, but right now there seems to be no other bidders going for Declan Rice. So this is going to just raise his price or put more pressure on Arsenal to get the deal done, if that's what they're going to do, and as well as give maybe West Ham a little more leverage in the discussion. It's like, hey, if you're not going to make this offer, there's been links of other teams going to do this. Are you willing to take the risk? It's very much like it uses a comparison for basketball, is where in the NBA, when players are up for restricted free agency and they sign the player just to force the hand of the other team. For me, it's very similar to that, and I like that Man City are going to play those games because it's about getting that competitive edge and forcing the hand of your opponent. So if the price goes up, now other options for Arsenal become more difficult because you spent a lot of your money on Declan Rice. So even though I think Arsenal, no matter what, are going to get across the finish line, the question is for the amount of money, and is it going to give them a leftover enough amount of money to work on other options that they've talked about, a la Kai Havertz. They were initially in talks for Caicedo, etc. Like there's other players looking to get, but if they blow their whole wad now, what will they be able to do later?
Yeah, and actually, I love that you mentioned Caicedo, because that's sort of the player that I'm about to mention next. Chelsea, of course, are about to part ways with N'Golo Kante, who's closest joining Al Ittihad for the next season. But there are reports that Caicedo, with a $80 million bid from Chelsea, is progressing well. Still a lot of details to iron out there, but Gio, what are your thoughts about those two players joining those two London teams?
Uh, I actually agree with Mac on that one. I think the best fit for Deck is Arsenal. I think there's a lot for him. There's a lot for him to grow. There's a lot of room for him to grow there. But that's not to say that he can't become an elite player under Pep as well. Pep has turned a lot of players into elite players. He's turned Gundogan into a very elite player this season. He's turned Bernardo Silva into a very elite player. So I think he'll succeed anywhere. But I think the better fit in terms of you know, the project. I think growing as a team, as a unit, that Arsenal side with him in it can achieve a lot. And to add about the Caicedo thing in Chelsea, hey, who knows if it will work, because nothing has worked. So they're just throwing another rock in the pond and hoping they hit something. But good luck to Chelsea. Good luck to Caicedo. I don't think it's the best move for him. Me personally, career wise, but I think there is a lot of money to be turned down. So I think that does make sense for him for a big money move. That he feels like he's due for. But again, like I said, Chelsea haven't hit anything nose on in any other signings since the Todd Bowley takeover. So who's to say that this one will be the right one? But also who's to say that this one isn't the turning point? But again, it's tough to. It's a lot of pressure to put on. Was it Caicedo, who
Hmm.
obviously is a midfielder, a more defensive midfielder at that, to kind of change the team in what fans want them to change. So definitely going to be a tough season for him if he ends up there, because there's a there's a lot of movement that's about to happen.
Yeah, Mac, do you have anything to add to that before we move on to my last transfer?
Okay, so in terms of Caicedo and Chelsea, Conte, that kind of situation, I find it very interesting because their ideal game plan is seeming to be where Pochettino may want to go back to his 4-2-3-1 system that he ran under Tottenham, and the idea would be to have Fernandes play alongside Caicedo at a base of a midfield, which I think structurally can make make a lot of sense, where you have more of a progressive ball playing midfielder and more of kind of a workhorse, which would be Caicedo. So I think that fit can make sense, but my question is, what's going to cost them to be able to do it? Because the reports have been for Kai Havertz. I don't know if that's a player you are going to talk about next, is to go to Arsenal for less than 70 mil. So if you're paying 80 for Caicedo and you're selling Kai Havertz, for a player you bought just a few years ago, won a Champions League with for 75, and you're selling him for less, still before the prime of his career, I have a lot of questions about that, about structurally, are you making the correct decisions on top of letting Joao Felix go, unless you plan on bringing back Lukaku or figuring out your strike force there, because if they walk, they had a number 9 hole already. You're just kind of digging a deeper hole to replace, to add a kind of it back into your bloated midfield. So there's so many plates spinning for Chelsea where you really don't know, is there a vision here? And I have not heard Pochettino speak about any of this, so I would be very fascinated what his thoughts are, because you would assume that he's taken the reins, been in control, is really kind of implementing a plan, and you would trust him to do so. But I just don't see that plan yet. Maybe we're too early in the game, but it does leave me with a lot of questions.
It sounds like he knows something that we don't, for sure. But
just
lastly, to touch on, another transfer, and this one in Gio's realm, back to Man United. Kim Min-jae linked heavily with Man U, but reports that German side Bayern Munich have entered discussions as well. Does that put you in a little bit of bother at all? Anxious about that signing getting over the line?
Yes and no. I think to be honest, I think the Bayern are kind of going through an identity crisis. I think there's a lot of pressure there. Yes, Man United is a big club. There's going to be pressure regardless, but I think with a little help from a former Korean Man U star, that might push him over the edge. Hey, he's still an ambassador for the club, so I think it's still very possible that is happening as we speak. But apparently, it's still a lot of rumor based. Nothing has been really negotiated all that much. But yeah, I think he would be a great add, as obviously Rafa Varane, is getting up there in age, is quite injury prone at this age. And with the added competitions that they're going to be in, obviously making the Champions League this year, again, depth is always needed. So, if he's going to be the future center back, paired with, Lissandro, you might as well bring him in early, get him acquainted with, a coach that you predict is going to be your long-term manager, and, kind of get him acquainted early and kind of let him buy into the system as well.
Yeah. Definitely something to keep an eye on, Mac.
So the reason I want to just quickly jump in there in regards to the transfer rumors for him, because I think it's a very fascinating situation, because if I understand his reports correctly, is that he has a 15-day window starting July 1st where his buyout is 40 mil, which is inexpensive if you're talking about an elite center half that can go in today's market. So it really comes down to the personal terms, the agreement, kind of selling him the picture. And as of reports right now, Bayern are very close to agreeing to personal terms for him, and you just pay that buyout, which is pennies in comparison to a lot of these teams, and is on brand for Bayern of not spending a whole lot of money. If I'm Manchester United, I'm very concerned, because he's been their clear number one target. He's played exceptionally well for Napoli in the 1 year that he was over there, starting in place of Koulibaly, which he did not just replace Koulibaly, he surpassed in terms of what his output did defensively and progression with the club. So I'd be very, very concerned, because that's a player that there have been reports to close, where it seems like, I know that there's the takeover conversation, but for Manchester United, the reports were Kane, it's no longer going to happen. Their number one target for striker, that is. Their number one target for midfielder, if that's a defense, that might not happen with Kim going to Bayern Munich. So now you're looking at second and third options across the pitch. And their first attempt to sign Mason Mount let's be honest, was a joke. Similar to Arsenal's attempt to sign Declan Rice. They're just playing the waiting game, but the important part is they need to get something across the finish line to then work across the next thing. So I would be a little bit concerned there, and I think that it'll be interesting if they do get it across the finish line, because he could be a good piece, especially with reports of Harry Maguire leaving, where they do need, at the very least, reinforcements. They do need a fourth body, worst, and I assume everyone would want Maguire to leave, because their game plan really much has been is to get rid of the players with like I said earlier, the bloated contracts, players that it's been so difficult to get rid of because we can only really loan them out and offer even help pay for some of it because we've overpaid them, right? And Maguire falls under that bracket, and maybe you might get more of a better option to come in as that fourth rotation piece. So I think that is a concern. I don't think that it's not as if for me, and I'm rambling on about this too long. It's not as a must-have for them, but they do need something else there, and it seemed like he was their number one target. So it'd be a little disappointing if they weren't to get that across the finish line.
Yeah, exactly. I wonder if this will be done before his military service is done. As we know, he's had to go back to South Korea to complete that, but we'll keep an eye out on that. Maybe he will get that transfer done before his time there is up. But again, we'll cover that in some of our future podcasts. But for now, let's take a quick break here, guys, and then we'll be back to discuss our predictions. So stay with us. Welcome back to House of Footy, guys. We are going to continue our podcast now, discussing our predictions for the 2022-2023 season. It's time to do our reveal and see who got the most correct answers and who got the least correct answers. And I'll go start first. And right off the bat, guys, I gotta admit, I was listening back to our predictions, and I have to wholeheartedly apologize to my co-hosts and all of our listeners. I got this one terribly wrong. Of course, I'm talking about the top 6 predictions. I predicted that Liverpool would come first, Manchester City would come second, Chelsea would come third, Arsenal would come fourth, Manchester United would come fifth, and Spurs would come sixth. Of course, as we know, Man City won the league, Arsenal finished second, Man U third, Newcastle fourth, Liverpool fifth, and Brighton sixth. I let us down for sure, and I don't think I got anything correct there. So for sure, I'm already starting at a disadvantage, but I do want to point out that I did predict Spurs to be sixth, and I did predict that they would have a downfall. I guess that's the closest thing I had in terms of a correct prediction. But I'm not sure if you guys share the same thoughts. But let me, I guess, toss it to you first, Gio, about your prediction. Sorry. Before I do that, as I was listening back to our podcast, I took some notes on some of the outrageous takes that we had. One of my outrageous takes, I just want to hear your guys' opinion, was I think Liverpool are going to finish first, because we did the predictions right after the Charity Shield match, the one that
the Community Shield
started.
Yeah,
Community Shield. I said Liverpool looked like they had more depth than Man City this season, and of course I was terribly wrong. So I apologize for that one. I guess, Gio, let me toss it to you. Could you read out your predictions and then give us your reaction to those?
Yeah, I mean, I had City as champions, Liverpool in second, Chelsea in third, Arsenal in fourth, Man U in fifth, and then Spurs in sixth. I think it's pretty obvious what the disappointing pick here was, and that was Chelsea. Chelsea was nowhere close to third. I think we all dropped the ball on that one, but yeah, that was definitely a tough pick. Obviously, they've had a horrible season. And obviously, Arsenal having a great season, and me not giving my own club that I support enough credit, and having them at fifth, I think is a tough pick too. But yeah, I mean, I know Mac's gonna talk about his list, but I think he actually did a great job of having Newcastle in the top 6. So, Mac, why don't you touch on your list real quick?
So I had Man City first, Liverpool second, Arsenal third, Spurs fourth, Chelsea fifth, and Newcastle sixth. So I do want to separate my own shoulder with patting myself on the back with my hype for Newcastle. That's something that we'll talk about later for sure. Of course, I think that's probably my best pick, as well as between all of us, I had Arsenal the highest. So I think that's a semi-win. However, I was way too high on Liverpool and Spurs. I I did have Chelsea lower than the both of you. I thought Chelsea were going to finish, but we were still very far off because they finished 12th and we had them 3rd and 5th respectively between us, right? I think obviously my biggest miss is Manchester United. I thought they would fall apart early in the season. I looked like a genius for the first couple of games, and then Rashford definitely changed that for me. So I think that's probably my biggest miss. Maybe that's my internal hate, my bias there, but no, it definitely is. But the point being is that definitely was probably something I regret looking back. That prediction was wrong, but I'm very happy with how I did have Arsenal in 3rd and Newcastle making the top 6.
Yeah. On that point, the Man U point, Gio, credit to you. You did predict that Man U would start slow, but you thought they would pick things up, and of course they did start slowly. I think they're one of the first couple games. I think they lost 2 of their first 2 Premier League games this season, and of course that was a slow start. Matt, you as well were very, very, I guess, unconvinced about how Man U would line up the season because at the time we're doing our podcast, Frankie de Jong was in talks about potentially going to Man U. We didn't know if Ronaldo was going to stay there, and of course, we know how that situation played out. So, just wanted to bring that up and hopefully give you guys a bit of context for how we made our picks. As well, Gio, you called it correctly for Chelsea. At that time, Barca was picking off all of their transfer targets, and you said, although we believe in Tuchel and how they could, how he can turn this thing around, you did allude that this season might not go as well as they hoped, and of course it did not. Moving on as well for Mac, you did correctly. Well, you did pick Spurs as a top 4 team, but you did correctly sort of talk about Conte and him not having a great second season compared to what he does in the first seasons. And I guess to credit us, Gio and myself, we did have Spurs a lot lower than you did for top 6. So that's interesting to note. And lastly, Gio, not sure if you remember, Bernardo Silva was linked heavily to Barca, and you thought Marco Corella as well was linked with Man City at that time, and you didn't know if that's going to be something that could happen. And that kind of gave you a little bit of reservation to see why Man City would not finish first, but ultimately you did choose Man City to finish first. And of course, this is how it all played out. Just wanted to bring it up, guys, because that's a lot of crazy things that happened at the beginning of the season before it all started. And of course, we were quite wrong in many parts, but some things we did get right. Before we move on, anything else really that stands out for you guys in terms of our top 6 predictions? I guess, Gio, I'll toss it to you first. Anything that stands out regarding your predictions?
In terms of my team, it was just rough. It was just really, really bad. I think simply to put it, I think Liverpool and Chelsea definitely underperformed this season by a long shot. So that really just threw everything off from the very beginning. It was hard to not pick City to really win the title. Obviously, Arsenal kept it very close, and we didn't give Arsenal enough credit early.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it was just the Liverpool Chelsea one. I don't think anybody would have predicted as bad as a downfall that Chelsea had. Obviously, with the new money coming in, not having Lukaku, I think kind of benefited them. But hey, it was just poor. It was just very poor from the very start, and they couldn't save themselves. And that saga itself made it feel like 3 seasons in one.
Exactly. Mac, I'm gonna have to credit you. You said going into the season, out of Man U, Spurs, even Chelsea, Arsenal were the most settled team with potentially more depth. What are your reactions to that prediction?
I love it. It's nice. It's nice to be right. It's nice to feel like you had an idea of some things that were going to happen. But no, for me, it really came down to it seemed like they had an idea in anticipation of how they want to be able to play going forward, and a lot of other teams were more in flux and had more questions, and that's why Arsenal, even though I want to say that going season I predicted them to do this well, it seemed they were the best of the rest versus being kind of as much of a challenger, right? Or they had, like I said, fewer questions to answer. So definitely happy on that. But again, I really wish I picked Chelsea lower. That would have been so much fun. I really do miss the times when we had like the Tuchel Conte handshake. I missed that. That was the season. I miss those days. It was so much fun prior to the World Cup. Good times. Good times. Fun was had.
Yeah, definitely. And myself, as I said, I can't really speak much. I got it terribly wrong on that, so do apologize again. So let's quickly move on to the rest of our sort of league predictions. First, I guess we'll start off with dark horse team to watch. And again, I have to apologize to my co-hosts here. I picked Leeds as my dark horse team to watch. You guys actually got it right in terms of their relegation, and of course, I was wrong in that. I thought that they were gonna be fine this season. They were finally sort of looking like they had an idea of recruitment. Of course, that turned out wrong, and of course now they are in the championship starting next season. So I guess I'll move it on to Gio. What are your reactions to your prediction for dark horse team to watch for the 2022-2023 season?
Um, Again, another disappointing pick. Obviously, the season they had before, it seemed like, sky was the limit. Things were clicking with a lot of these guys. It seemed like David Moyes really had a kind of a grasp at how he wanted to set the team up. But it just didn't really click. Obviously, with the new signings of I think Giancarlo Scamacca, that didn't really work out, and he didn't really play too many games, so they had to revert back to a Mikel Antonio striker being their striker. So they kind of had to adjust the game plan a little from how they thought they would play, with a Skamaka on. But with that being said, with the disappointing Prem season they had a quite successful European season. So
That's right. That's right.
I guess that shouldn't count to this because that's European football, but the success there, I think it balances out because they did win a European trophy, first one in 40 odd years, 50 odd years.
Yeah.
So that's a big win for them, and a great way to send off the boy Declan Rice.
For sure, for sure. Mac, I guess out of all of us, you were definitely the most correct one with Newcastle as your dark horse team. Give us some of your, I guess, thoughts on how you came to that decision going into the season, and how, obviously, how it's played out now.
Money, 100%. It was all about the Benjamins, like it just seems like they had the most flexibility. Okay, to be completely honest, because I think, Ray, I may have mentioned this to you quite a few times, but I'm a big Eddie Howe fan in terms of what he did initially with Bournemouth a long time ago in the Premier League when he initially managing there. So I was definitely a fan of how he wanted to be able to kind of implement the style. I thought in terms of leadership, him sticking to his principles, I thought was very, very strong. And just being in a position to spend a full season with the Newcastle team, with players coming in for their second season, like Bruno Guimaraes, generally speaking, players do perform better in their second season in the Premier League. Similar to what for Gio, I would give you a half mark in terms of year one because West Ham were very good for the second half of the season in a lot of ways because players that were signed because of their performances and are at the end of the day from their overall season are now going to be in Europa League, which if you asked West Ham at the beginning of the season, huge dub. Paqueta playing for the second half of the season was much better than the first half. So players like that for Newcastle, I thought had already had the opportunity to settle in, as well as in January, if there was momentum, they had the money available to make other signings, which they did in Isak. So it made a lot of sense there. And now this is just going to further kind of vault them up into the next tier of clubs potentially of what they're able to do. I know we didn't talk about what they could do next year, but there's a lot of rumors about them doing a double signing for Madison and Barella to complete their midfield trio with Bruno Guimaraes, and I'm here for it. I think that because it's inexpensive and takes them that next step forward at the same time, right? So again, exciting times to be a Newcastle fan.
Just a quick question, just to stir the pot a little. Would that make them a contending team, like really to contend in terms of depth wise, not dropping points? Is it? If they make those two signings, I think it's very possible, and I would love to see it. Just to have Pep on the hot seat, I would love to see it, and I think that definitely puts them over the threshold of being, a good team. That would make them a great team, and they drop less points. They're definitely in the mix.
I would say they would definitely look better than they did this season in terms of goal scoring. Definitely these two players elevate them, but and of course with the Champions League they will, I think, target getting as far as possible for that. I don't think they would be necessarily contending week in week out, but definitely keeping it very very close. I think this season they were probably off the top by, yeah, it looks like they were off the top by just under 20 points. They might close it to like 10, 8 to 10 points next season with those players. What do you think, Mac?
I mean, to be blunt, no shot. It's the first year in the Champions League. It's really, really tough. Now they're going from playing one game a week, really, sometimes in a cup competition, where next season they're going to be doing the Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday split for games, where you're playing a squad, which I would argue their starting 11 is very good. I disagree, actually. They still have to play Willock. So a lot of their starting 11 is really good. But just those two signings, I don't think there's enough depth there in rotation if they sustain an injury to any key pieces, where I think it would be, and this might be too early in the offseason to say, if they finish at the same spot next year, it's still an exceptional season because it's about the consistency of staying in the top four. So I think that's huge for them. And I don't think their goal should be, we want to chase the title. No, it's about building a platform, right? Where you can now, okay, we have 2 years of success. We have 2 years of bringing all this money in. Then can we start to make that next step, right? Where, because it's one thing to get in the Champions League. It's very difficult considering how this league has gone to stay in a Champions League position. So I think that more so would be their focus. And their goal should be finishing again in that 3-4 spot.
Okay. Well, definitely something to keep an eye on. But let's move on to another prediction that we had, category for notable mad shit or notable crazy shit that happened this season. I predicted that a big name will miss out on the World Cup due to injury. I can't really recall anything of that sort happening. Not hoping for injuries myself personally, but of course, with the loaded season, I thought that would be a easy prediction that would happen. Ultimately didn't happen, so that was great. And of course, the World Cup was a great spectacle for us, so that is a great benefit for us all. Gio, Matt, did you have something to?
I was going to say you could argue Ronaldo was a big miss from the World Cup, but was it injury? I don't. It was more like complaining, whining issues. That's why he missed. No, I don't know. Is that unfair?
Misused in the last game. That's why the coach is fired. But on to better things. Not the Prem, but Benzema did miss the World Cup, and Nkunku did also miss the World Cup.
Yes.
Unfortunately, not the Prem, so I won't give you points there.
Benzema, a big name. He had a good 6 months of football, and that's about it, right? No, is he?
Hey, this guy's name is forever etched on that Ballon d'Or. So
this is true.
I will give it to him. But yeah, Nkunku, Benzema did miss the World Cup, but not the Prem.
Right.
But that did happen. Yeah, tough.
So I would give it to you. I would give that one to him, Gio. Would you?
Yeah. I mean, predictions are hard to come by. So
this is true.
I can definitely see that, and I can definitely give him credit for that. But yeah, no, for sure.
Sure. Gio, you I think predicted Everton to get relegated. Of course, that was a big talking point even till the end of the season. Let us know your thoughts on that prediction.
Ducore, why did you have to score? If you did this, I would have got full points here.
Yeah.
But no, it was a good fight from them, obviously. But it's gonna be interesting how they're gonna attract players and really kind of rebuild that club. But who's to say they won't be back in the same situation next year? Because I don't know, and I'm just really unsure of how quickly that they can improve that club. Especially signing new players apart from injuries and things like that. Who's really gonna want to sign a Calvert-Lewin at this point when you didn't sell him at his sort of peak? So, I mean, I guess they did the right thing in selling Anthony Gordon, but you're kind of stuck with what you have right now, and it's gonna be very tough. And they kind of really did with selling Richarlison, the real R9. But I couldn't say that with a straight face. But they did it. They have some money there. Maybe they can go out there and spend because they still have that Premier League funding. So interesting, but I wouldn't be shocked. I would not for a moment be shocked if they were kind of in the same situation, struggling to stay out of the relegation zone throughout next season.
Ooh, something to keep an eye out for next season. Mac, lastly, your crazy prediction for this season?
So I'm going to give myself, like, let's say, if we're going to score this at 100, I think I'd give myself like a 25%. I'll be honest here, because I predicted that Manchester City would break their points record and be an exceptional team, and Liverpool would be the team with a lot of points but still end up losing the Premier League. So because Man City were exceptional, didn't break their points total, did win a treble though, so that's one of the best teams of all time. You know, so I think I'm close there. So I give myself 50 for that part. Liverpool, I get like, maybe I might even give myself a negative, so I still end up with a 0. You know, I would argue this one I clearly lose out of the three of us. Where Gio, you were very very close. Ray, I think you were spot on. Me, a little bit maybe too notable or mad with some shit. You know, so it is what it is.
Hey, that's a bold prediction. I guess, yeah, it was definitely hard for it to all come to true in the end. But let's move on to our last couple predictions. Relegated teams. Myself, I predicted Nottingham Forest, Southampton, and Bournemouth to get relegated. Of course, the relegated teams this season were Leicester, Leeds, and Southampton. I got 1 out of 3. Gio, what were your predictions?
Everton, of course, we know stayed up. Bournemouth, we know actually had I think a quite solid season, and then Leeds, who obviously is relegated back again into the championship. So 1 for 3 as well. So I'll join you there, Mac.
Same, 1 for 3, blah, blah, blah. I got Leeds. My other teams I got wrong were Bournemouth and Nottingham Forest. I really wanted Nottingham Forest to get relegated. I'll be honest with you. I wanted them to have so many signings and still get relegated, and then everyone leaves. And the next year in the championship, they have nobody to play because everyone's gone back to the Premier League after everyone they signed. Or, you know, Keylor Navas goes back to whoever, who knows, right? But it was close, but no cigar. I think for me, if you were asking me, I would give the edge to Gio because you were the closest with your second pick, because Everton were literally the last second escapees. Versus Nottingham Forest, Bournemouth, we had same duos there. We just got the other two teams right? So I'll give it to Gio there, but that's a 1 for 3 for all of us if we were to score it.
Yeah, and I think you pointed out a good point, Mac, when we did the predictions, that all 3 teams from the championship. The first time I think they all went up and then went down was in like the 1990s. This time around, all 3 teams stayed. Of course, Fulham, Nottingham Forest, and Bournemouth, which is surprising because that means all 3 teams that were relegated were actually Premier League teams the season before. And so that's something interesting. And lastly, first manager to get sacked. I'm just going to read it out for all of us. We predicted Frank Lampard as the first manager to get sacked. Of course, it was Scott Parker, so none of us get the point there.
I thought it was harsh. I thought it was a harsh firing for Scott Parker. Very harsh.
Oh no. He shat on all of his players. Like, we do not have players good enough to stay in the Premier League. Guess what? They did. You know, so he was wrong and he was offside. He was asking to be fired. So I don't think we should lose that. I think Scott Parker, in fact, should give us money because he screwed over our prediction, and we were close because Lampard easily could have got fired twice this year and should have.
But hear me out. Maybe that's the motivation the players needed. They just needed to prove someone wrong, and they needed to prove Scott Parker wrong.
That's right. That's what I liked it. That's a good twist.
That's right. Mac, you pointed out last time that 10 managers were let go from their respective teams last year. Can you guys predict how many managers were fired in the Premier League this season?
Ooh. So fired during the season or replaced?
Fired.
Oh, that's a great question. Gio, do you want to go first, please? Thank you.
I don't think it exceeds 10, but I'll go with 8.
I'm gonna go with it. Actually, it's higher. I think I'm gonna go with 12 because I think one team fired 2 managers. I remember that happening.
So the correct answer is actually 15. A total of 15 Premier League managers were let go this season, and I thought, of course, Spurs did fire 2 managers.
Yes.
Spurs was 2.
Yeah, Spurs. Someone was 2. Yep, I remember that.
And of course, a lot of changes happening towards the end of the season with the teams down there at the bottom of the table. So,
who are the only teams? The only teams not to change managers: Man City, Arsenal, Man U, Newcastle, Liverpool, Brighton.
Brighton changed managers. De Zerbi came in for Graham Potter.
But he wasn't.
actually,
Graham Potter
he
wasn't
was fired.
fired though. He wasn't
Yeah, he
fired.
wasn't
So that's
fired.
that's the thing. That's what I'm thinking. So I think everybody else fired their and West Ham. I think West Ham were the only other team not to fire their managers. Right? Am I?
7 teams.
So the teams are Liverpool, Man City, Brentford, Arsenal, West Ham,
Brentford.
Fulham, Nottingham Forest, Newcastle, Man U.
Tough.
Wow.
Very, very tough.
Yeah, more than half of the teams
Yeah.
actually let go of their managers.
It's
So
crazy.
crazy stuff. On that note, guys, let's take one last break here, and then we'll be back with our predictions for individual awards. So stay with us. Welcome back to House of Footy, guys. We are going to finish off today's podcast now discussing our predictions for the individual awards winners. Of course, we're going to start off with top goal scorer. Pretty simple, this one. We all predicted Haaland would be the top goal scorer for the Premier League season. Of course, he was the winner. I don't think we have anything really to add on to that one. So, Gio, I'll let you go on for our next category.
Next category is most assists. Ray had Martin Odegaard. I had Bruno Fernandes, and Mac had Kulusevski. And obviously, the winner is the guy who plays with Haaland. Probably how he got all those assists.
Of course.
Mr. KDB. No shock there.
Pretty
No
simple.
shock there, right?
Yeah. There's no shock there. Yeah, I'm still angry about that. I hate Richarlison so much. Why did he play? Kulusevski could have got finished higher. Okay, obviously, because Kulusevski had the fewest assists, of course. For clean sheets, to jump in there, Ray, you picked Allison. G, you picked Aaron Ramsdale, and I picked Ederson. The winner was David De Gea, so we all did not get that correct. However, again, I'm last because Ederson had the fewest amount of clean sheets. God damn it.
Hey, David De Gea, though. Who would have thought? Because I think at the beginning of the season, we thought maybe this is his last season and he may be replaced. And was Dean Henderson on his way to Nottingham Forest before?
He was.
I can't even remember.
Everyone's on their way to Nottingham Forest. House prices
What
went
I
up.
will say is I would trade his Golden Glove. I would trade his Golden Glove for all the mistakes he's made. Those howlers.
Yeah.
I think he should be stripped of the Golden Glove. I think that adds definitely something. It adds something or takes away something. But yeah,
You should whatever I was listening to some talk on Sky Sports, and they're like, oh, because the situation I talked about earlier in the podcast with De Gea, and if every time they ask Ten Hag, how do you feel about De Gea signing next season? Would you want to be able to? Yeah, we want to keep him. He had the most amount of clean sheets. It's like, oh, how do you feel about all the howlers? He's the best goalkeeper in the Premier League. He had the most amount of clean sheets. Like that is verbatim his indoctrinated answer. No matter what, any question I have to De Gea, most clean sheets. You know, like, but you have to accentuate the positives. So maybe you could sell him and get something for him. You know what I'm saying? So it's a very, very interesting split where you're happy but depressed about the De Gea situation. Ray, you want to go to our next category for yellow cards?
Yellow cards, of course. I predicted Højbjerg to have the most yellow cards this season. Gio predicted McTominay, and Mac, you predicted Xhaka. The winner was Joao Palhinha. But I think, Gio, you got the closest with McTominay. I think he had 8 yellow cards this season, if I'm looking at it correctly. Mac, you and I were, I think, off of that. Xhaka, surprisingly low amount of yellow cards this season, and Højbjerg, I can't even remember how many yellow cards he had this season, but the way Spurs played, I would just give him an extra yellow card just because of that. But what do you think, Mac, about that Xhaka pick?
Xhaka had 4 yellow cards this year. That's in the Premier League. He had 4 yellow cards. Obviously, again, not ecstatic about that. But I'm very curious to see. Let me just kind of pull it up for Højbjerg. Actually, I'm very curious to see how many yellow cards did he have? Because again, I don't want to finish last again because this is starting to get depressing here. You know, but again, he should have easily gotten another 4. It's just because it was or Mikel Arteta tried to drag him away from multiple confrontations. The one that screams out to me is, remember, I think there was the Tottenham fan that kind of kicked Aaron Ramsdale, and you see Mikel Arteta like running to go deal with this situation, but then see Xhaka moving the direction too, and they're like, I'm not going to care about the fight. He's like, Xhaka, calm down. So if Arteta wasn't as good of a manager, easily we could double those tallies, you know, but you know, it is what it is.
I agree. I think Højbjerg actually had 5 yellow cards in the Premier League, Max. So that leaves you at last spot again. Moving on, Gio, most red cards this season?
Most red cards. Ray had Tim Ream. I myself had James Tarkowski. And Mac had Lewis Dunk, and the winner was Casemiro. So I believe everyone we picked had a whopping 0 red cards. So wasn't even close. And so we would, none of us win on this one. None of us win.
Yeah. I feel like the rent was due for Casemiro for all the red cards he should have gotten in a Liga but never did. It's only fair. Is this how it works?
Yeah, I think it was solid picks from all of us, but who would have thunk it? Who would have thunk Casemiro would be the only one to get two red cards, and a newcomer like Joao Felix would get more red cards than all of our picks. But hey, that's what the Premier League season gave us this season. But Mac, lastly.
So, player of the season, Ray, you picked Haaland, Gio, you picked Mo Salah, and I picked Odegaard, and of course, Haaland won player of the season. However, I will argue, I think I should have won that because I had the most audacious take, and it was really close. But, I still lost that. But, again, I did this. But Haaland was well-deserved considering they won the Premier League.
Yeah, for sure.
I just want to say one thing. If a franchise like Liverpool got swindled by a man like Mo Salah, I was just another victim. For him to get paid that much and to perform like this season is abysmal. I think is embarrassing to him as a Liverpool player. I think the franchise of Liverpool should be quite disappointed in themselves to be swindled by a man like Mo Salah. Hopefully he comes back and does better, but I sure hope he doesn't because he's disappointed me severely. So I just want to put that out. If a club like that can get swindled, so can I. So, and I did. So, hey, fair play, Mo, but I hate you.
Hey, Jill, perfectly put. I have no more words to add to that. So we're gonna tally up all of our scores for the individual awards because I think we were going into this section with a tie. So in our next podcast, we'll read out sort of our results there, and then we'll talk about our small forfeit that we have for you guys. But this concludes our podcast for today. If you like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social medias. That's at @house_of_footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us via email as well, houseoffooty@hotmail.com. The next time you hear from us will be Friday of next week when we bring you our most hated evergreen podcast. So something new for you guys to listen to. And something new we're going to be trying out on that note. Thank you, Mac.
I hate a lot of players, so it'll be fun.
Thank you, Gio.
Salah's going number 1 on my list, buddy.
See you guys soon.